I give this the Lovecraftian seal of approval. This is a weird film. Right there. Okay. Saying that this could be a wonderful scenario for Call of Cthulhu. Yes! Yes!
I'm Dan Carlson, man, woman, camera, person, TV, and I'm drinking the spiked strawberry burst from Steel Reserve. It's a little too strawberry-ish for my taste, but I'm already committed to it. I started drinking it, so
might as well go all in at that point.
Yeah.
It looks a little odd in my Blade Runner cup here too.
Looks like unicorn urine.
I was going to say it looks like some kind of sample after something had gone horribly wrong, but
yeah.
I work at a hospital. These things stick in your brain, you know.
And I'm John Kadolf, man, woman, child, beast.
As you can tell, John doesn't pass the competency test.
No,
it's okay.
And I'm drinking an Angry Orchard.
Oh, okay. That's your go-to, isn't it?
That is my go-to. I buy it by the case.
Hi, I'm Dave. I am the drunken house guest of the Two Cat Men. And currently, although I have 3 separate ones if you want to see them all, but currently I am drinking Pilsner Urkel. I decided that August is my month to drink beer that tastes like beer. So
Urkel.
That's how
I make that?
Did I drink that?
Can I brew that?
I love the idea that you would be wandering around a brewery in the Czech Republic going, did we vent the tanks properly? Just one of those moments.
We watched a found footage film this week.
We did.
It was Dave's choice. Maybe Dave would like to tell us about it.
The film is called LUNOPOLIS. It was shot in the great state of Louisiana, which a lot of places are now going to. Basically, there's like a round robin of states that give you nice benefits for shooting in there. And Louisiana happens to be one that's basically throwing money at production companies, some in Georgia. The film was from 2011, and basically it starts with 2 guys who are conspiracy theory researchers going down into this tunnel behind an old abandoned shack. And as they go through there, they discover the tunnel leads into a dilapidated, what looks to be an old building.
Far underground.
Surrounded by water.
Surrounded by water.
Yeah.
And
under a bayou.
And in the process, they find this one particular device. And here's where I was chuckling because Dan and I were texting back and forth while we were watching it. Mm-hmm. And I said, I love how these guys are kind of like stereotypical gamers. Hey, here's an idea. We've got this piece of gear. We have no idea what it does. Tommy, put it on, turn it on. Let's see what happens.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And they found this place. They found this place because of a picture that was given them by George somebody.
It was radio show.
Yeah, it was a caller from a radio show who called in really paranoid and really worried about what was going to happen to him because he knew something.
It's actually a reference to a real thing that happened on Art Bell's radio show where this guy called in and he was completely freaked out. And he was in the middle of explaining why he was freaked out and all this other stuff when suddenly Art Bell got knocked off the air for 20 minutes. You'd look it up because it's a really weird story. It is either, some will call it proof of conspiracy, or else this is the most insane coincidence that has ever happened.
Mm.
So they took that concept of that phone call, used it as part of their plot point, and after these 2 guys find this space and get this device, they start backtracking and trying to figure out what all of this stuff is and what's going on with it. Eventually, it turns out to be a conspiracy of people who have gone forward in time and are now living in the moon. In the moon.
Are they on the moon or in the moon? I thought they were.
Technically speaking, it was in the moon.
Yeah, I think it was in the moon. They you could find their entrances on the surface.
Oh, weird thing about this is that it starts out as a found footage movie, then it turns into sort of a History Channel style documentary, the kind of stuff you see on History Channel now, where they're arguing that aliens built the pyramids and stuff like that.
Yeah, a good part of the second act is like this documentary where they interview various conspiracy history researchers and stuff like that. And that part really just grabbed me and held my attention because it was I love the fact that they wrote up this conspiracy theory and it feels like something that you would see on History Channel.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
With that guy with the hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about that, I have my problems with it a little bit because I'm not a fan of that whole History Channel development.
I feel you on this one.
Yeah. But the cool thing about that is how it goes into details about how time travel works and how it stacks, so how different timelines actually stack on top of each other.
I thought somebody clearly read a lot of quantum physics going into this, because that part is stuff that I've been hearing on, shall we say, more reputable science channels.
Well, one of the reviewers I was reading, I read a reviewer of this movie, and he compared it to What the Bleep Do We Know? I don't know if you guys have seen that. I have.
Yes, I've heard of it.
It's actually pretty interesting. I don't, some of it's kind of out there, but some of it is based in science, and it kind of goes on that kind of tangent.
As long as they're not flat earthers.
Well, some of them maybe.
No.
I mean, if you're on the moon, good chance you're not buying the flat earth theory anymore.
Well, if you watch enough propaganda, you could probably be convinced, even as you're looking at the round earth, that it's flat.
Yeah, I'm kind of amazed that we are now in the age where I could sit there and quite literally hold the actual piece of evidence that somebody needs to disprove their conspiracy theory, and they'll be like, la, 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 I don't see it.
That's where we're at, yeah.
No, the film in terms of its storytelling style, because to talk anymore would really ruin the last act, and I think that would be a shame, because the last act of the film really does kick it into pretty high gear, and it has a really cool kind of spectacular ending that ties in with that entire notion of how the functions of time travel work. And it's an interesting film because there are moments there where I'm pretty sure this has to be somebody's first film, because there are parts in there where they lost me and I had to kind of keep going and press myself through it. But at the same time, when it was like they almost lost me and then they brought me back in, and they almost lost me, brought me back in.
I had that experience a couple times where I was like, I don't know if I like this, and then all of a sudden something would happen. We go, whoa, and then, I got sucked back in.
It was the same guy who did pretty much everything. His name is like the first.
The director is also the lead actor
of the credits types of things. Yeah,
the villains kind of remind me of the bad guys in Halloween 3.
Yeah,
they're very nondescript. They're just walking around with their ties and.
There's a cult that goes through here, the Church of Lunology.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you take a look at the design and everything they did for their materials, and you're like, wow, somebody's poking holes at L. Ron Hubbard and Company. But I felt, okay, there were a few scenes, for example, like when they actually went to the building that was owned by the Church of Lunology and such, where I was like, that could have used some editing and a few other things. But they did do a good job of keeping me enthralled with how the story worked. And it's one of those films where the further along they went and the further that you enter into this reality that they're a part of and they've created, the more I was kind of excited to be a part of it. The more I wanted to see more of this, because that's always my weakness. Like, there are some podcasts I listen to that I'm like, people get upset because they never resolve the plot line. I'm like, no, they keep digging deeper, and I love that part. The further out there and the crazier it gets, and the more that the logic begins to support the crazier it gets, the more that I kind of enjoy it as a person who loves stories.
It's a story that definitely builds. You have a lot of questions toward the beginning and nearing, the second act. You wonder kind of where it's going. And it all builds and finally wraps up. I would say that I'd have to give I'd have to give the acting about a 6.
Yeah.
Right in that range.
Pretty clear that we're drafting from
okay.
the credits and a couple of special actors.
That conspiracy guy that they interview that kind of narrates that whole middle section actually does a fantastic job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's got to carry a lot of weight in this movie, and he does pretty good.
While I was watching it, I kept thinking to myself, this is the caliber that Dan and I would put out.
Yeah.
You know, if we were doing this film, you know, as far as however, I have to say the special effects and the animations and everything else was right on spot. I mean, that was all well done. I mean, for a film that had the budget that I'm guessing that this one did, you know, it did a good job.
It basically feels like a film that was being shot for the price of coffee and donuts. But there is a scene involving a car, and I won't ruin it for the audience.
Yes. That's one of the moments that sucked me back into the movie when I was starting to leave it. So
I went, wow, they actually sank a little time into getting that right.
Yeah, it feels like a Friends made it, but it does feel a little more ambitious than something even like Blair Witch Project or Willow Creek. I mean, that's what kind of saves it for me. This checks all the boxes for me of movies I'm not interested in. So for it to actually win me over by the end is quite an accomplishment. I don't like found footage. There's a handful of ones I do. Blair Witch Project, one. Cannibal Holocaust, Cloverfield, but mostly I don't like the genre. So,
and to me, I'm not a huge fan of it because it kind of became the fallback for every person who had $5,000 in a video camera.
Don't get me. Yeah, Paranormal Activity is great, but I don't need 9 of them.
Yeah,
you know.
But I think in this case, the storytelling really saved the day because when you've got a very small budget and not a lot to work with. Mm-hmm. The script is going to be the thing that saves your ass, and they actually put some time and thought into making a really good story out of this. And for that,
oh yeah, well, and just keeping their own mythology straight must have been quite a mathematical endeavor.
That is a difficult thing to do. You know, in anything, you know, whether it's a film or you know, you like writing anything where you're creating to keep your own mythology straight, where you're not treading on the feet of any players within that mythology is difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
You have to check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Oh, wow. He's got the Lovecraft stamp of approval and a rap reference.
Yeah.
This is a good one.
On the whole, when I first sat down to watch it, I will admit that I had taken
how did you come across this movie? It's not something that I ever heard of before.
It was running on Netflix for a few years, and it was listed as, you know, you might enjoy this. And sometimes when I see that, I'm like, what is the strangest looking movie by description that they have? And especially, you know, late at night, I've taken some sleep meds, so I'm in that hazy realm. So the first time I watched it, I'm like, wow, this film was tripped out. So I went back this like a week later and thought, okay, let's watch this with nothing in my system and see if it's as cool as I thought. And I went, it's not as cool as I thought when I was on sleeping pills, but it was still way cooler than I thought it was going to be. So and I figured that it would be an interesting one to hand out because this is going to be that classic film that people are going to love it or they're going to hate it. And as a result, I love that part. I love those kinds of films.
Yeah. I love that the pull quote for this poster, if it was to quote all three of us, would be like, checks all my boxes for things I don't like, not as good as when you're on pills, and has the Lovecraftian seal of approval.
It's still a film I've sat down now and probably watched 5 different times just because the story that they write is so interesting and so bizarre.
I really got into it when I think the only scene that really got me with the menace was when they were all surrounding him kind of in the church.
Yeah.
You know, that it started to get really kind of, whoa, this is going to be good. And then that's kind of what bothered me about it, going from there to veering off into the 40 minutes of History Channel stuff. Yeah. But that stuff was interesting on its own, but I was like, I want to get back to that.
It all wraps up in such a way that it makes you happy that you did watch it, because the end is definitely worth the rest of it.
The end is a punchline that is well deserved.
Yeah, and it's well crafted too. I mean,
especially when you take a look at the story of this mythology that they've created, and when they get to the end, you realize, oh wait, that cycles in perfectly with what these guys have been saying all along.
Exactly.
And usually you do that in a way, you do it and it kind of comes off cheesy, and this way it felt really like it completed the entire film.
I didn't want to like it even after I liked it, because it's the kind of movie, it reminds me so much of the garbage that's on the History Channel, and I instinctively want to just say it, but I can't deny that I was compelled the whole time, and that I enjoyed myself, and that it surprised me at every turn. So my bias is say I don't want to like it, but I have to go by what I reacted to, and what I reacted to, I actually really did enjoy it.
You're floating in the middle of the ocean of your own disapproval.
Yes.
I'm caught in a glass case of emotion. It's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination, but there are moments there that I'm like, that's just clever as fuck. That was really well thought out, and I'm really going to give them a lot of respect for that.
When for a small moment there, I in the opening, and then anytime they were in that underground building, I thought to myself, I wonder if maybe they kind of happened across this cool building and thought, man, we could really build
a story around it
here. Because I mean, we've done that kind of thing where we've been somewhere and we're like, wow, we could film something really cool here.
That's how Robert Rodriguez did most of El Mariachi. He was just walking around, and he's like, I saw that there. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. And it saved him money. He's like, I'm going to write scenes that take place in these existing locations.
I think that the reason possibly one of the reasons that they went into the History Channel section is to kind of pull away from the found footage type of format, because I think they realized that a lot of people are getting tired of found footage type of things, and they wanted to give you a break from it. I
can see that, but I could also see that it's really the only way to inform people of this dense mythology. You can't really put those words into the mouths of the people who are finding in the found footage. Two things that I thought of is, first of all, the conspiracy at the heart of this movie is exactly the sort of thing you would expect to hear come out of Jeffrey Goins' mouth in 12 Monkeys.
Oh yeah.
It's just so detailed. It involves celebrities like Michael Jackson and everything. It's got everything, But the other thing is, I wonder if in 100 years that somebody's going to be mining the YouTube archives and find this movie and think that it's actual claim to reality. I could see that. That's part of what makes me pull away from this kind of thing, is because we're so saturated with it now in reality that a fictional exploration of it feels like just adding more fuel to it. But it's not the movie's fault, but it just happens to be the situation we're all kind of.
I know, to me it kind of harkens back to, and keep in mind this was shot in 2011 where conspiracies were picking up steam, but they were not nearly as impactful on our lives as they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And they were still flights of fancy and relatively harmless. Compared to what it is now. And I think that's also part of it, is that it reminded me of those days of sitting around where, you would write a plot line for a story or a game by starting off with, okay, let's make a conspiracy theory. And then by the time you're done, you've destroyed a case of beer and you're probably high as fuck. But you've got a great story and you've got a bunch of notes that you'll have to decipher in the morning.
I can see the pull of something like this with people who really are interested in folklore and things like that as well.
Yeah.
I know that there's a big movement right now in horror, with folk horror, with Midsummer and The Lighthouse and The Witch, and people who like those kind of movies may gravitate toward it as well. I've begrudgingly liked some of those movies. Like Midsummer was great, but John still keeps trying to get me to watch The Lighthouse, and I just
you mentioned earlier that the perception of mining for information about our civilization. It would be kind of fun to have a movie with the plot line that the only like we're visited by aliens, but the only reason that they came here was to save us from ourselves, based on a dystopian future movie that they were able to intercept as they were passing through our solar system. That's like what they got, was this some dystopian future movie, and they thought, shit, that's what's actually happening down there. Oh wait, no, it says it's happening in 10 years. Oh, we've got to save them. And so they, there's this whole invasion that is really these aliens who have decided to save us from ourselves based on this dystopian movie future that they think is actually going to happen in a few years.
John just wrote the sequel.
I've got to write a script. I'll be right back.
I think you just wrote the sequel to Lunopolis.
Yeah.
I press play. I enjoyed it. I didn't want to. You made me like it.
Hey, that's like 2 films in a row. Anna and the Apocalypse, which you didn't want to watch, you didn't want to like, and now it's like it's your go-to.
Yeah, I love that movie. Like I said, I'm getting the novelization today. I keep proselytizing and sending the videos to people, and they just ignore them.
You prostate
in the world when you walk in not expecting something, and you get something amazing out of it.
Yes. Did you say something about your prostate, Dan?
I'm enlarging it as we speak.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I definitely also say press play. I was thoroughly happy with this film. I was really happy with the mythos that was created. I enjoyed the filmmaking for what it was, and the storyline, if you stick with it, will pay off, most definitely.
Yeah.
So
and Dave, you're the one who chose it, so we know you got to press play out of you. But if you want to expound on that,
press play. There's going to be some moments in there where you are going to kind of have to slog through it, but if you do, the payoff is absolutely worth it. Also, there's some surprisingly good acting. There's some surprisingly good camera and effects work in this. I love stumbling into a film where I'm expecting to walk in to tear at a new asshole, and I walk away going, no, that was remarkably good, and especially for working with something that was obviously as limited as what they had.
And it's not a long movie.
98 minutes?
Yeah.
So, it's
given an hour and a half of your life for way, way worse than this movie is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I spent an hour and a half this morning doing something that I thoroughly regret.